You know that purple, or the old Marketo color, purple pretty much runs through our veins, both locally here, and all of us are in Sydney today, but everywhere else around the planet as well. Huge Marketo fans. We're talking today about marketing tech, and MarTech practice is pretty significant, especially with Marketo. Some of the other areas that we touch, maybe we get to in future Unlock series sessions. Sales tech, how does that integrate in with Marketo? Data and analytics, UX, for those of you that have availed of our UTX products in the past, you'll know what we're talking about there. So on to today's session. This is Unlocked is a very, and I call it Australian because most of us on the call are, very casual Australian-like event. Today's topics are on the new interface, and for those of you that aren't on the new interface, it's coming, and program member custom fields. So I've got two experts with me that I'm always very excited to introduce, firstly because it means I'm not doing a demo, which is good for everybody concerned, but also because these guys are field experts. They've got hundreds of Marketo implementations under their belt, enormous amounts of experience. By way of segue, and as a complete coincidence, here coincidentally is an email that Marketo sent to the team today for one of our customers' instances. This was received a couple of hours ago, advising us of the impending change from the old interface to the new one. So with that, I'll pass over to Andrew now. You might want to take over the screen such that you can describe a little bit more about what MEUE is.
Thanks for handing it off, GP. I've done a few of these now, so I'm sure a few of you already know me. For those that don't, my name's Andrew. I've helped sort of build this Unlocked idea out, and today I'll be talking through, as GP so nicely put it, MEUE and some of the Treasure Chest features in Marketo. Before I get into that, I wanted to start with a quick poll. As it looks so far, quite a few of the people on this session are not on the MEUE, the Unified Experience, so it's interesting. Now, the rollout plan for the Unified Experience sort of started mid last year, in which quite a few customers initially sort of transitioned across. Now, a huge majority of the people that are on the Unified Experience actually got transitioned across sort of late 2020. And obviously those that are not on it, you will be getting it relatively soon. The main sort of factors into not being on the Unified Experience as of yet include items like instance size and the purchase add-ons you have in your Marketo instance. So one of the primary contenders is workspaces. But I mean, rest assured, for those that don't have it, you will have it very soon. One of the consultants at Blueprint X ANZ, Veronica Holmes, I'm sure quite a few know her as well. She actually created a sort of 3-part blog series on our Insights blog channel, and in which she goes through this in depth, in so much depth in terms of what it is, when it's coming, why it's coming, how you can best prepare yourself. It's a really, really good read. I'd strongly recommend going through that if you have any questions or any more after this session. To touch on what this sort of means for you, if you aren't on the Unified Experience, I'll sort of run through 3 main points. The first is, if you're not already transitioned, it sort of is time to tidy things up. That's going to give you the easiest sort of transition period you can want. And the reason for that is it's different. It's a different looking user interface. There's not a whole lot of functionality change, if any. It's mostly design based, and there's a few additional items in there. But in terms of folder structures and just having things set up in a really good way for when you and your team transition, you can find things easily. I and I imagine the whole BPX ANZ team highly recommend, governing your folder structure strategy, naming conventions, and all that sort of stuff. It is recommended prior to swapping across. In terms of documentation, if you're a business who has some level of complex process and these are documented for either staff that don't always do this process and they need a refresh, or new staff coming on board, and those documentation pieces have screenshots or references to things in Marketo, they will more than likely need an update. We're getting a new UI altogether, and that results in changes. So we need to have that updated when the right time to update, that's up for debate. In my mind, you want to do it. You want to say ASAP, but at the same time, I would recommend waiting a little bit of time while they sort of flesh out the final updates to the UI. But the sort of underlying point I want to make here is that you do need to make updates to those process documents, and it is important. Third and last, I'll mention on this presentation is if you are sort of the power user and the leader for the automation team, you should sort of position yourself in such a way that you can communicate all these changes to them, be that mentor in a way, if they have questions about the transition, that you can easily supply those answers and just sort of really keep on top of the changes that come through. There will more than likely be quite a few more that are coming. And whether you're transitioned or not, it's a good idea to stay on top of that to make sure that someone in your team is that person that people can go to for questions. As a final point, if you do need a hand with the transition and the challenges that this transition is going to bring, feel free to reach out. We can help you through this process. I know it can seem a little bit uneasy, but we can help. Now, onto the first major change. Marketo has essentially been reskinned. The unified experience has brought a new interface design altogether for almost all sections. Updated iconography and updated activity icons. It's a big change. What I want to do now is briefly jump out of the presentation and go into these two windows. So these are two of our instances. One is the training instance and one is our production instance. The left is the classic and the right is the unified experience. Now off the bat, we can see there's a color change, fairly straightforward. But if I tab into this side, one thing I wanted to point out is there is a huge difference, or there's a difference in icons for your programs. So we've lost a bit of the color and we've gotten to this sort of new Adobe-fied nice look and feel. So obviously the first one is we've lost some of the color in the icons, which can help differentiate, but they do look incredibly good in my opinion. Going a step further, some of the local assets that we have that can be attributed to these programs. Again, differences in icons. And what I was referring to before when I mentioned activity icons, I was trying to think of the right words for it, but this relates to an icon that appears based on an action you have made. So for example, in this smart campaign, we've got a clock because it's a batch smart campaign. We've actually lost those sort of activity icons for these little green circles, and that's sort of uniform across the instance. To help with this transition to this new look, we have got an ability to hover over and see exactly what that's going to be doing. So in this case, it's scheduled to run, active trigger, approved, and so on. So that's sort of the first big design change. Other sort of important items that have changed with the new UI, we have lost the Powerball in the top left corner. This has been everyone's go-to navigation within their instances for a very long time. But we have gone more now towards having a tabular structure at the top here. So that's a new feature. Another great little feature there is in this new UI is if we go to a folder, we can actually create assets directly in that folder. So if I go new local asset, I create a list called new list. That is now in the folder. Now that seems small, but if you've been using Marketo for a while, that is, you got to appreciate the small things. That's all I'm saying. So we can create things in folders now, which is awesome. We have lost drag and drop until 2 days ago. So we previously couldn't use drag and drop in the new UI, but it's back. Hooray. So that's a really, really great thing. So that's sort of the majority of the design changes as a whole. The next thing I want to go through is searching Marketo. Now, the old Marketo interface, or the classic Marketo interface, had search capabilities. It wasn't by any means bad. This is simply a case, for me, it's a case of you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know how much I wanted the updated search mechanics in Marketo until I actually saw them. But the way it used to work was you'd have a section in marketing activities at the top, you could search the section. Really useful, it's great, and it can be filtered. You can filter it to say, let's look at email programs, let's look at smart campaigns, all that sort of stuff. The new Marketo interface has brought some new features. Now, the first one is being able to apply multiple filters to this search. Now, if we go into the new UI, I'll briefly look into the old UI to show you. This is how it currently looks with the filtering. So we can say, let's do programs. It's a one program select or one filter select. But in the new UI, we have multi-select. And that is amazing. And while it might seem small, the times when you do need to use that to find something to organize how it looks for someone, whatever the use case is, it's a really cool thing to have. Further from that, we also have this really nice thing called global search. So in the top right of the user interface window, there's a little search tab next to the history, and this will allow you to search the entire instance, regardless of the section it is in. So in this case, we can see there's an email asset, there's a smart campaign. It gives you the sort of location by route. If I extend this out a little bit more, we can see the location, the route, and we can also use the filters here, the multi-select filters rather, to further sort of filter this down and find what it is you're looking for. So that, in my mind, is an absolutely massive win, and I love that Marketo has implemented that. Now, while I was hugely acclimated to classic UI, I do feel that the changes have made Marketo a whole lot more visually appealing. You know, I'm working in this, and most people are working in this day to day, and it is very nice to look at. And the changes haven't been drastic enough that have left me lost for days on end. You know, it wasn't a change similar to Salesforce Classic to Lightning. That was a big change, and there was awesome functionality that came with that. But this was a purely design UI sort of update. So I've found it nice so far. The search upgrades, what else I need to say? They're awesome. I love them. They're going to find some great use. In my use, this is going to be a contentious point, but I have noticed an increase in speed. It might be all in my head, but I have noticed it, and it's definitely worth noting. And finally, all the differences, you know, they're mostly visual. The core functionality remains, and that makes me happy. So now let's jump into the treasure chest. So the Marketo Treasure Chest is essentially a container of experimental features that's located in the admin section of your Marketo instance. So if you're an admin and you go into the admin section, you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a little treasure chest icon that has a few experimental or features that are in beta of Marketo. Currently, there are 5 features within this. I'm going to be talking through my sort of 3 personal favorites and give a mention to one more. Now, the first one is Campaign Inspector. Now, the Campaign Inspector is essentially a feature that provides your instance with a new tab located at the marketing activities level. Now, what this does is it displays all of the active campaigns, or it displays smart campaigns in a certain way. And that way is determined by what you elect as the filters and what you want to see. If we look on the right screenshot here, we can see the active campaigns. This is the filters. And these are some of them. There's a whole bunch of them in there that relate to smart campaigns. But you can sort of just say, I just want to see batch. I just want to see active. You know, I just want to see invalid to check that nothing's gone wrong. Make sure someone hasn't accidentally made a mistake. And it's a really good way to have an overview of all that's going on. You know, maybe you're in a managerial position and you just need to oversee how things are going. It's a good way to sort of have a quick look. If anything needs investigation, you can sort of take it a step further. But it is a useful tool for sure. The collapse folders, super simple, super awesome. I love it. Most probably won't be using this, but as a consultant, I think it's great. By default, if you're in Marketo and you open out the navigation tree whilst doing your work, your process, and you proceed to log out, logging back in will leave the navigation tree in the same state. This is sort of built to allow users to easily pick back up where they left off. You went through 5 campaign folders to get to that specific program. Here it is again. Easy to find. That's great. Enabling this feature essentially says collapse the tree whenever I log out. Now, it might seem counterintuitive for some, but if you've got consultants, in our case, if you're a consultant and you're working on an instance with a few other consultants, I don't necessarily want to see what Mina was looking at, editing that program. So I like it. It's great. I use it, but you don't have to. The third is the person capture reject invalid form. Now, this is an interesting one. essentially what this does is, when enabled, this feature will block form fill-out activity from being processed if the form ID associated with that form fill-out is invalid. Now, it sounds like it's a little bit complex when I say it like that, but essentially what it's meant to do is, when activated, if your instance comes under attack from bots, one of the processes that bots can go through is they'll take the form details and they'll start, submitting it or getting it back to the instance. And one of the variations of that is running through program IDs. Now, the enablement of this setting is simply saying, if it's an invalid form ID, don't accept the data. So it's a cool sort of fail safe if you have been under attack from bots before. That said, it is in beta. It is an experimental feature. And as is the case with most of these, most of the items in Treasure Chest, if you don't need this, or it doesn't, serve an immediate solution, if this isn't a threat to your business, I don't see a point in actually activating this. If you're okay, you're okay. And the final one I briefly wanted to touch on was the Munchkin beta on landing pages. Now, previously, enabling this feature would opt you into the Munchkin code beta. Enabling this feature used to opt you into that Munchkin code. Now it doesn't. But the reason you would opt into this is because many of the core Marketo functions need to update. They need to update to the dependents, such as internet platforms. And the beta content offered you a front row seat to get this. But now it doesn't. Activating it doesn't do that. As a final point, again, the treasure chest is an area of experimental and beta items.
Just before you go on, Andrew, I've actually got a question here, and it came in at the time. I think he's talking about the invalid form. The question from Boris was, I assume this is only working with Marketo forms, not web forms.
As in embedded forms?
That's my guess.
Yeah, if embedded forms it works for as well.
But embedded Marketo forms, obviously, that are embedded.
As long as it's an embedded Marketo form, it should function correctly because the data is coming into Marketo, and Marketo can read that form ID.
Sure. Hopefully that answers that question. Sorry for interrupting. Back to you, Mina.
No worries.
Ooh, but I'm going to interrupt again. I don't know why I haven't had collapse folders on all these years. In fact, I'm going to do that right now.
Hi guys, most of you know me. I'm not going to introduce myself again. Program member custom fields. Now, this is probably a more recent release. I think in the last 6 to 9 months, this feature came about in Marketo. And very recently, maybe in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it has been yet again updated with a very, very important update. So what are they? Program member custom fields are an additional set of fields enabled for use on programs and the assets found in those programs. Now, I'm going to be very repetitious with this because it can fool a few people, and you may end up going down the path of using them like a normal field, and they don't act exactly like a normal field. So they can be used to collect non-vital data that you would otherwise not want to store in your CRM. So think of things like dietary requirements, think of +1s, +2s in an event, the types of communications the person might be interested in, where the information you're collecting is not really relevant for any type of other program. So you don't want it passing between two programs. And there's no reason to store that piece of information after the fact that program ends, for example, if we're an event. But we'll explore some more options down the track. How to set them up. Now, if you are an admin, you're probably aware of how to set up a new field, a new custom field. And what you are probably quite used to seeing is once you hit the new custom field creator inside of admin, in the past, there was only really one object to write that to. If you're in an old instance of Marketo, it will say lead. If you're in a new instance of Marketo, it should say person. But in the past, it was just lead or person you could write to. Now what you'll see is a second option against the object called program member. And if you create a program member field, it will then ask you what sort of type of field is this. So a quick reminder is down the bottom. I won't go through all of them. This will be in the notes, and that we'll share with you after the webinar. But there are a number of types that you can use and set up inside of program custom fields. There are a few general notes though, and I did want to highlight these because there are gotchas. Similar to segmentation rules, there can only be a maximum of 20 program member custom fields in your instance. So choose these wisely and for scalability. It's not something to just create and go on the fly, because at some point you will max out and then you'll have to raise a ticket to support to remove them. And as you know, when you're trying to remove a field or a field value such as program member custom field, you'll have to unpick it from all the programs that might be still using it. I'll refer to these as PMCFs from now on because it's just shorter. PMCFs have some similarities with normal fields in how they can be tokens, but they are limited. We will discuss the limitations. Initially, they are limited to the program, so they can't be referenced globally. And in this, they're very similar to my tokens. So they live inside the program, they act upon the assets in that program. They cannot be referenced or cross-referenced against multiple programs. Like my tokens, PMCFs can be used in automation, so for data value changes, for choice steps, but using a specific flow build. They are also independent. They're independent. Think of them as independent post notes tied to a program that is referencing them. So for example, a dietary requirement recorded on a PMCF for Joe Blogs exists in one program. But if Joe Blogs is in another program, that PMCF logged in program A does not come over to program B. That same PMCF is actually empty in the other program. People carry those PMCF values for the time that they are in the program. Once removed, the value is scrubbed. So you cannot reference someone's PMCF value once they've been removed from the program. It just exists for the time that they are in program. Those values can be tokenized in customer-facing assets, such as emails, forms, landing pages. Once again, I'll be quite repetitious there, which in that if the asset is local to the program, it does not work if the asset is outside of the program. In using them in automations, you'll find that in smart campaigns and smart lists, there are 3 filters, one of which is a trigger if you're in a smart campaign. The other 2 that are noted with purple arrows are found in smart lists and smart campaigns, where you can trigger off the program member data being changed, or if it was changed in a set number of time, or if it was not changed in a set number of time. And if you're trying to then do something with that information, so let's say they fill in a form and then you want to change something about their program member data, inside of the flow step, the one area that you can do that in is to drag in and change program member data. And in that, you'll get a box that looks like the one right at the bottom of my screen, where you affect the program member data on a specific program. You can change one of the attributes, and the attributes that will show up there are whatever program member custom fields you've built in your instance. You can also add choices, similar to a normal flow step. Are there any questions so far?
We've got one,
Sure.
which is earlier on, you mentioned that anybody who was a member of that program has the data stored.
Yes.
What happens if somebody accidentally I think the question is, what happens if someone accidentally removes them from the program and then they put back in again?
They're scrubbed. Yeah. So unfortunately, the moment they are removed from the program, the data itself does not exist against the lead record. It actually exists against the program. So you having removed them from the program scrubs the content that would have been stored. If they re-enter, it is not there anymore against them. Now, one of the questions that came up when we were discussing this actually in the office was, how can you even see these recorded PMCFs? Because they're not a field against the lead. You can't go to the back end of the customer's record or the contact's record in Marketo and see these as fields. They don't exist as boxes. But you can query people who have had or have PMCFs in a smart list, which means that you can go into a smart list, look for PMCF values, and these are the purple ones noted here. So program member data was changed, or not program member data was not changed. However, if you want to see the actual values logged against a member inside of a program, you go to the program that has that program member custom field logged to it. You hit the members tab, and here you'll get a listing of all your members. and you can manifest or show the columns that have to do with the program member custom field. This is the only place that you can see the values in an aggregate manner. So as a snapshot. And as you know, you can export from this window if you need to, but it's the only way that you can see all the members at once with whatever program member custom fields that they've given you. A couple of examples of where you might be using them is a program with a communication preferences. So let's say you're running a webinar, and one of the questions that you ask in the form is the sort of follow-up that the customer or that the lead or the prospect would prefer. So be it a phone call, email, or SMS or whatever it may be. Because those aren't fields that need to be tracked or managed for an ongoing time, but they are very much to do with that program, it's a good place to use a program member custom field. If you had an event with multiple locations, you could have those locations as a selectable field inside of a program member custom field. +1s is a big one. You can also have dietaries. Number 3 example could be a program with a satisfaction score. So if you're trying to get information back from the contact about how satisfied they are with a service or with a specific type of campaign that you ran, and you don't want that score to impact their overall score, it's really just specific to an event perhaps, you could use it there as well. And really, it applies to any program-specific data. When you think about different programs having very different needs, and where that need, it's satisfying it is not going to be something you can handle by creating a dedicated field that ends up being in use by multiple programs. The best approach would be the program member custom field. A couple of resources are always Marketo docs. Always refer back to the Marketo Bible on this one. The other area would be how to create a custom field in general. The Nation is also very friendly if you've got questions around using program member custom fields. It's still in its infancy, but there are some people who are doing amazing things with it. And of course, if there's anything else that you have queries about or other functionalities in Marketo or Martech in general, feel free to revert back to our blog. And you've got our details, so you're most welcome to contact us. I think that's it from me, aside from any questions that might come up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. If you do have any questions, just put them into the Q&A box. I was sitting here thinking how I might use that for one of our clients, and by way of example, and tell me if this is right or wrong, Mina. So we write back for one of our clients the dietary requirements for that person, such that we can, and here's an example, at the next event that we're doing, we write back, or we know that that person likes a particular topping on a pizza. Let's call this person Alistair, for example, just because Alistair is a real example, and Andrew will know who I'm talking about here. So we got a really wonderful relationship with this guy, and every time we actually write and invite them to an event, we say, "Hey, Alistair, do you still like what is it, mushroom double jalapeno on top of your pizzas?"
Yes.
So that's because that's written on his person record, or the lead record, person record,
Yes.
whatever you want to call it, and would depend on the instance. Now, what we could do is still say that, hey, Alistair, do you still like this? But if you don't, and you want to change your mind for that event, that next event that he's registering for, we could get him to update it in there, in the program field. Is that right?
Yeah, you could. You could pre-fill what you believe their old preference for pizzas were against the program member custom field, show it to them in an email, and say, click here to update it, and take them to a form to update it for themselves.
Yeah, and that persists purely for their membership of that program.
Of that program.
And if they don't get removed from that program, because why would you? You can just keep that for history.
You could.
It will persist forever. But his default would be what's written on the lead record. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. I'm not sure if everybody got to see one of the answers to the previous questions, but somebody asked, can these fields be deleted? And Mina's responded to just the panelists, I think. But so for everybody's use, you're saying that a support ticket's required for the deletion of these fields. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. So like a normal field, if you were to then require, if you've maxed out at 20 and you need to retire one of these program member custom fields, The first thing is you need to unhook it from any of the programs that are still using it. And obviously you would lose the data like any other field before you raise a ticket for support.
Sure. Cool. Alrighty. There's no others at the moment, but plus we're 7 minutes over, so I apologize for that. But it just goes to show lots of content to talk about. So I'd like to thank our two panelists. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Mina.
No worries.
Another enlightening session as ever. Thank you very much. We'll record this, of course, and send it up in the usual fashion. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a great day.